You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is October 30th, 2024, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a local group. It is Gabby Ingram, and she is the founder of Stand Up Sacramento County, which is an activist group that formed during the COVID crisis or the COVID pandemic, I guess is the best way to say it. But anyways, we're going to talk a little bit about that. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce you to the rest of the panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have our special guest, Gabrielle or Gabby Ingram, and we probably will have another knucklehead dropping in the middle of the show. Tim will probably join us this time as well, Tim Everett. And my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. So we always start out first and foremost with a Liberty quote of the day. So before we get into anything else, let's jump to that, because I think this is kind of relevant to some of what Gabby's group is doing. And so let's jump into that. It is a quote from Ayn Rand, and we haven't used one of her quotes yet. We've hit a lot of people in the Liberty movement, but not her yet. And this quote was, "The government was set to protect man from criminals, and the Constitution was written to protect man from the government." And I think that, when we saw what happened during COVID, that's kind of why we need the Constitution, because we saw all kinds of, I guess, liberties taken at our liberty, so to speak. And I think that also has a lot to do with sort of the origin of Gabby's group and our podcast as well. We sprang up during that time too. What do you guys think of this quote? I think it's marvelous.
I do. I was laughing because that's exactly what we've been battling for years. I mean, our group and then everybody up and down the state, never mind federally, is that government has morphed and become a beast of its own, and it no longer holds to that quote, that standard.
Mm-hmm.
This is true, Gabby, what you just said. But I think the broader picture here is that and you're right, the government have morphed into something else that was never intended by the founders of this great land of ours. And the problem is that we are sitting by and letting it happen through our complacency and our dependency upon government. So instead of the government, instead of the Constitution being used to protect us from the government, which is the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, and all the other amendments, which will protect us from government action, we are now, in some cases, getting in bed with the government. And the most horrific example of that is the media is getting in bed with the government to violate our rights. And we are seeing, and during COVID, we saw a lot of that, where this so-called disinformation was censored, and the media was right there going along with the whole charade. So we are losing our country because we are losing the meaning and purpose of the Constitution, which was meant to protect us, to protect us from this beast that the federal government have become.
If I could sit down with the founders and say, hey, let's think of one thing, I think it was so common nature there, and it was so common sense at that time with the townships and holding those electorates or holding people accountable, and that the average family paid attention to what was going on in their community. It wasn't written into the Constitution, that additional checks and balances, and then people grow complacent and we're struggling to feed our families and all of the things that distract us, and the watchdogs are not written into the checks and balances system. And so that's where all these grassroots groups or everybody, I think COVID was an awakening point of, whoa, where are the people watching out?
Yes.
And so that created this bloated system that we see now.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is people don't have a principled idea of what the role of government should be. So as long as it's sort of amorphous, everybody wants government to do everything. And eventually we realize government's more like a parasite on us than an actual help. And I think that's a lot of what we've seen now, and especially when you start looking at where we've gone with debt and all that. But I did want to say too, if you're watching, Gabby is so committed on this that she's doing this from her car. So give her extra props right now tonight. So that's why it's a little bit dark in her image there. So she's just in the fight. She's in the trenches, and that's where we're going from. So, but this does bring up what your group does. So I wound up first being exposed to your group when I was at the recent Constitution Day that they had in Folsom about I think it was about a month ago now, and so I found you guys' table, and it sounded intriguing to what you guys were doing. So we're having you on the show to talk about it, and it's funny. It sounds like you guys evolved just sort of like we did out of this whole COVID mess, where sort of alarm bells were ringing, and hey, it's time to get active. So what does your group do? And let me bring up a visual too of the page. By the way, if you want to try and connect with the group, you go to Telegram. So, and here is the slide. Oh, and there's our screaming Ulu of freedom, Tim Everett. So he's joined us now as well. So anyways, but here is the Telegram page, and it's t.me/Stand Up Sacramento County. So, and of course you have to install Telegram, and I found out it helps if you install it in your phone first, and then you can get it on your computer too. So, but anyways, so tell us about your organization, Gabby, and what you guys are all about. How did you guys start up?
So we started through, technically this started in 2019 I was a part of a group that was at the state capitol pushing back on a bill, SB 276, which stripped children who have medical exemptions to vaccinations of their ability to obtain those medical exemptions. There's three very narrow ways that a child can get an exemption to attend public or private school. And so I was there because I have a vaccine injured child, and as a citizen lobbyist. There were thousands of us there trying to push back on this bill. And while we were there in the hearings for that, we heard them discussing Assembly Bill 262. This would have been 2019, AB 262, 2019.
Oh, and by the way, I have
ahead.
a visual here. James, can you show this? I think this is related to one of the children's issues where you guys, it looks like you guys are at one of the, at least maybe this is the county or the city building here. And it looks like a lot of people maybe getting ready to testify or something. So
yeah, so this is at the I think that was 2023 at the annex, because they're doing all the construction at the Capitol. So this was at O Street, and this was I think this was AB 665. It was one of the kids trans bills, and so this was grassroots groups, yes, in line for hearing. So this is much of what it would have looked like at the Capitol in 2019.
Okay, and then this looks like this is just you out with a sort of rallying a group of people as well to get motivated to do something about some of these
anything
issues.
We can attend, like the constitutional group, to get information into people's hands. Yes. So AB 262, we were there for a different bill, but if you've ever been to a hearing, they're discussing 20 to 100 bills, and it was to grant public health, basically activate them of a fourth branch of government under an outbreak, under an emergency order. And we're like, that's weird. Why would you do that? So this was August 2019. And knowing what we knew, just watching how it had evolved with vaccinations for our kids and rights being stripped away, we were like, we should keep an eye on this, right? And then Newsom signed it into law September, October, and then we started hearing about this Wuhan virus, and our ears perked up, because in our heads, sitting in the hearing room, we're like, watch, 2 to 5 years, they're going to find some way to put this into place, because CDC definition of an outbreak is just 2 to 3 cases, right? People think outbreak and they're thinking thousands are dying, thousands are sick. It's 2 to 3 people. Wow. So we were kind of like, that's weird. We should pay attention to that, right? So we were on alert when we started hearing about the Wuhan virus, and a group of friends of mine in February of 2020 gathered in one of the girls' houses and said, they're gonna shut us down. They're hyping this up. All of the propaganda is pushing this. We need to get our homes in order. So we were ready we'd already done the research we already knew about ivermectin. We already knew about hydroxychloroquine. We were ready for how to treat it before half of us had even gotten sick. And we had food. None of us were running for toilet paper before March of 2020. So we saw it coming because we were sitting in that hearing room and we're paying attention, right? So that's kind of how I kind of came onto the scene. In the summer of 2020, Freedom Angels, which is friends I met at the Capitol, I didn't know them before 2019, Denise and Tara, had put out a call to action.
Go ahead. Just a second, Gabby. So we have a visual of a flyer from this as well. So here's a Freedom Angels flyer. Go ahead. So
this is from August of what year are we in? August of 2023, we did town halls, the Empower California, up and down the state, educating people on the legislation and how to activate to try and flip seats in the legislature. So this is a town hall that we did. And so they reached out and they called it their United Counties of America initiative. And this was summer of 2020. And it was anybody who has any knowledge on any of this that is willing to start contacting their county public health officers, their county board of supervisors, their city councils to get to remove these emergency proclamations. And we're well past 60 days. The numbers, if we even trust the numbers, are down. We don't trust the numbers. They were bloated to begin with. But it was, how do you request a meeting with a board of supervisor? How do you request a meeting with a mayor? What data do you show them? Here's what other counties have done that have opened up. Use this as a way, help leverage small businesses. Look at what your long-term taxes are going to look like with all these businesses that are closed. It was common sense information to take to local government to say, hey, y'all meant well. Nobody knew what to expect here, but this is overreach. This is hurting the community. This is hurting businesses. This is hurting people. So let's open back up. And that was our intent. And so they trained us on how to make those phone calls. Here's research to send out. And up and down the state, we had 29 counties across the country. At least 15 of them were in California, mobilizing together, pushing the same information to our counties and cities.
And Gabby, when you say they trained us, who was it, I guess? Because this is one of the things we always like to do is put together the pieces of the puzzle. If you are trying to get active out there, I mean, you're watching somebody who literally got motivated during all this COVID and took action. So who was it that helped out with the training?
It was Tara and Denise on the top. And Denise, so we've been talking about flipping seats. Denise is now running for assembly in the Stockton area for Assembly District 13. Because, the legislature to us, it felt impenetrable. And now we're like, nah, we see what's going on here. So now we're going to penetrate. And so Denise is actually, hopefully she'll be elected on Tuesday. We'll see.
Is she running? Is she running as a Libertarian or as a Republican?
She is registered as Republican. There are only 2 candidates right now, and she's running against a Democrat.
I see. Okay.
Well, so one thing I wanted to show, I think this would be a good area to break in with a video of you taking action at a county board of supervisors meeting. We've shown other groups as well. There's a Constitution group that's locally active that also does these types of things. But this is Gabby going in front of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors to question the authority for this whole issue of emergency action. And so, James, maybe we could play KOL number 1.
I actually came here today to ask what the metrics were to end the local emergency declaration. So I just heard the legal reasons, but I heard nothing about there being an emergency. So liability shield, funding, volunteers. That's not an emergency. That's reasons to perpetuate the emergency, but that's not the reason to go against government code to end an emergency at the earliest. Where's the actual thing? Government code 8558C. to terminate given there's no local emergency. So, I mean, legal counsel weighed in, so I'm assuming that they've looked at that, but that's my concerns, is that we continue to perpetuate this. Case rates are down, death rates are down, viruses don't go away. This virus has animal reservoirs. It's never going to be eliminated. It will forever mutate, and we will have random outbreaks just like we do RSV, the common cold, the flu. I'm like, where are my children? I'm not saying COVID is like those. I'm just saying viruses don't go away. So June of 2021, we have the soundbite from when it was first announced that funding was a reason to keep it. We're almost, 6 months, 7 months from that. So we're in a good place. We may not be in the fall because, winter, everybody's vitamin D levels are lower. We're more susceptible to illnesses. So I am concerned that you're getting counsel to commit fraud. You all took an oath, and you're the only one that's liable for that oath, regardless of the advice sent to you. So if the state is perpetuating an emergency unconstitutionally, you guys following suit doesn't mean that you escape that liability. Never mind the fact that we need to, the amount of money coming through, our children are going to be paying for that for years. So I came here to ask those questions, and it was answered before I even walked in for public comment. So I'm a little scared about what I heard, and that's it. So thank you for your time.
That's awesome. And, the one thing I couldn't help but take away is you're there doing this, and you got to take care of kids at the same time too. I mean, you're fighting for our liberty with both kids under your arms, practically.
Yeah. I have pictures of them in a double stroller. In 2020, when I showed up, I was pushing a double stroller, and then obviously they're all over the place. And that video was February 2022.
Yeah.
And now my 9-year-old is more educated than most adults on what's going on. He'll just rattle off, because they've grown up in this. That wasn't my intent, but they've grown up in this, unfortunately and fortunately, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, they go ahead.
So just out of curiosity here, how old are your kids, by the way?
Right now they're 9 and 7.
Okay.
So it's been 5 years. So my son was 4 at the lockdown. They were 2 and 4.
Oh,
And
wow.
he did not understand, why can't I see Grammy? I'm not sick. And he was like, oh, I'm going to make her sick. And he'd cry. And he's like, they don't love me. They don't want to see me. And I'm like, we're not doing this. I mean, we had play dates, and we were sneaking play dates in our backyard. And then we were ripping caution tape down at playgrounds. Like, we had a whole group that just was like, this is stupid. We're hanging out, right? Because our kids, I'm like, my kids are not going to have mental health ramifications from this. I refuse.
Yes,
And so that's what they came up in.
Well, just to hammer on that note too, I mean, my kids were middle school age when all this happened, and one of the first things that happened was they told everybody to go home, and like you're saying, they put caution tape all around the playground areas and everything else. And so one of the things I would do is just go with my kids and hop the fence to a basketball court outside, and we'd play basketball. There wouldn't be too many people out there, and then eventually what they did, and I just couldn't believe it, they literally welded pieces of metal over the hoops of the basketball rims.
Yep.
It was just like, they didn't want anybody outside doing anything. They wanted everybody just locked in their homes. And
which was so
just
contrary. Yeah, because logic, vitamin D, right? For a virus, we need vitamin D for cellular uptake. So I'm like, this isn't logical. This isn't following any kind of medical, right, common sense. So, right. So we weren't going around grandma, just for those immunocompromised. Like, we weren't in the beginning. For the first 2 weeks, we're like, how bad is this? Right? Like, we weren't being reckless, but at the same time, we're like, our kids are fine. Our immune systems are fine. Right. So that video was from February of 2022. And I cited in that video that we had pushed in June of 2021, citing the code, the government code, and the Board of Supervisors had tasked legal counsel with, hey, look into what they're saying. And so on June 9th of 2021, legal counsel actually came back with pros and cons. It was a 5-page document presenting the pros and cons of rescinding or keeping the proclamations. And their breakdown came from the Chief Emergency Services And it boiled down to bloated government, not treating the virus. It was, we have all these people we hired, they're going to be without a job if we let them go. And the interesting thing was it cited immunity and protections for physicians and hospitals and pharmacists under the proclamations. And that, hey, we've got this county public officer that has access to all this information. If we rescind these, she won't have access to it. None of it was, we have 50 people, dying each day. None of it was like authentic, the virus is raging, we need to do X, Y, Z.
Well, and just to hammer on that too, and I have a link here to the Princeton Legal Journal, and so this is from Princeton University, and they said the unconstitutionality is the title of this article of California's state of emergency, and this article was written, I believe, sometime in 2023, but and James, maybe you could bring this up. But if you look right at the beginning of this, and this is what I want to draw your attention to, the state of emergency was called in March of 2020, and they still had us under a state of emergency going into 2023. And of course, in a state of emergency is where they can somehow gain the magic to take away all your rights that are protected supposedly by the Constitution. And and what this article tries to point out here is that a state of emergency is supposed to be a short period of time. It's literally an emergency. It's not supposed to be a constant state of business, as this clearly was over a course of 3 years here in California. So anyways, you go ahead, Gabby. I just wanted to point that out to people, that this was insanity that was occurring here.
It was. And so the way our laws currently are written is that that the legislature must vote to overturn the governor's state of emergency proclamation or declaration. Either he can overturn it and he's supposed to be evaluated in 60 days, or the legislature has to vote it out. And multiple attempts have been made by assembly members like Kiley or Gallagher or to put a new law into place that says that the legislature must vote to keep the state of emergency after 60 days, rather than because we had a unilateral government at that point. Like Newsom's just holding everybody on lockdown because our legislature is a super majority. They're not going to vote to overturn it. There was so much money funneling through. It was we rallied people to the Sacramento County Office of Education. Half the people we were rallying didn't even know what they did. They're like, what's SCOE? But they had $1.5 million of funding coming through the CARES Act. And the condition was, if they took it to, afford all of the things that they're doing to keep the kids on lockdown and masks and whatever, that if they stopped enforcing any of the orders that came down from CDC and such at any time, that they had to return all of the money, just blanket return it. So there were all of these strings attached. And so we protested that at SCOE. We called the county board of supervisors because they could have blocked the money, but everybody's just like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And we're watching business after business fold and mental health tanking and our elders dying alone in care homes. And it was criminal. And go ahead.
That was another point I wanted to bring up, because I saw in one of your a little bit of your background material that some of the other stuff, some of the first actions you guys got going on were some of these ordinances that were popping up locally to fine businesses up to $10,000 in some places in California if they caught anybody inside their business without a mask on. And it's just absolutely bonkers, the stuff. Not to mention the fact that the science of masks was just, science is a generous word here. That there wasn't really any real science behind a lot of this. This was literally just bureaucrats making up stuff. In fact, we even have a video of this mask mania as well that I wanted to show, just to remind people of how crazy this stuff was. But here is, Mr. The Science, Anthony Fauci, on masks. James, can you play KOL 2?
People should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. Wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. There are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching.
One mask is better than 0 masks. 2 masks is better than 1 mask. But you don't have to have double masks. Is that right? I mean,
it is.
And now we're hearing we should wear 2. Where do you stand on that? If I go to the grocery store, do I wear 2? Do I wear 3? Is it safer to wear 8?
One of the ways you could do it, if you would like to, is put a cloth mask over, which actually here and here and here, where you could get leakage in, is much better contained. So if you have a physical covering with one layer, you put another layer on, it just makes common sense.
So that was a cut up of a Daily Caller video. They should put together some pretty good skeptical videos this time, but just the insanity of listening to the science change by the day, and and if you questioned it, you were silenced. So what kind of a
political science that was changing, Jason?
yeah. But this was the atmosphere that you guys were, I guess, rising up on, I guess.
Well, yeah, and we initially weren't pushing back on masks. When we showed up, we were simply like, that's like, how are you going to find $10,000? You're activating law enforcement as an arm of public health for these unscientific measures, and then you're going to fine these businesses up to $10,000, and it was anywhere from $500 to $10,000, but they could levy liens and misdemeanors. I'm like, really? Like, how is it Mr. Donut Shop's responsibility to keep this person out without a mask? Never mind that you have exemptions for people who medically can't tolerate masks. So now you've got the donut shop guy policing, like, you're pitting people against people. Like, this is ugly. And so when we showed up, it was like, this is wrong, is why we showed up. It wasn't initially about like the mask. It was everything behind it.
Yeah. Well, I got to break in now at this point. If you're watching us on public access, at this point, this conversation is going to go on, and we're going to talk a little bit about some other, some other actions that Stand Up Sacramento County has taken, and with respect to some safety issues with the vaccine, and also some of the recent legislation that's passed on children here in California as well. So definitely check all that out and go online, and the conversation will continue. So back to you, Gabby. I don't know if you had anything else you were going to add on that.
No, I mean, so that measure, that ordinance is how Stand Up Sac County was formed. We went from just 2 to 5 people trying to have meetings in the idealistic mindset of, they must not know the science. They must not realize their heart is pure and they want to help the community. That was the mindset at that point. And that in December of 2020, when Bellianson had put forth that ordinance, we ended up with 50 people there. There were 2,000 emails that came in for public comment against that ordinance. There were 100 phone calls. There were over 50 people blocked from chambers. They wouldn't even give us a microphone. They wouldn't even let us social distance in the lobby with a microphone. We had to call in. And it was literally 1% of the community. And Dr. Bellianson pulled that, Health Services pulled that ordinance. It never went to a vote. And we realized, dude, it doesn't take that many people to turn things. And that was like a light bulb. And that was where Stand Up Sac County was formed. Was, okay, maybe we can do something. Because I thought we needed hundreds of thousands of people to help push change. We don't. And we have found that in the last 3 years, 4 years with legislation showing up to the Capitol. They're real uncomfortable when 5 people show up to have a meeting. They're not like, why are you here? They're real uncomfortable. And then when we do a call to action, asking people to call in support or opposition of a bill, you get 20 phone calls, and they're kind of getting, they're used to people not paying attention and being able to squeak things through without any comment from the community until we hear about it after the fact, and we're in a rage, like, how did you push this through? You don't represent us, but it's too late because it's already through. They're not used to people being educated and saying, hey, I don't like this. Let's sit down and talk about why this isn't going to work. And if you won't sit down and talk with me, then I'm going to phone all my friends and we're going to be in your district passing out flyers until you do sit down and talk with us and we come to some kind of resolution here. And so that has been how Stand Up Sac County has morphed to where we pay really close attention to what's going on locally, from the county to the state. The school districts we've rallied in for different things at the schools. So that's kind of our metamorphosis in a way.
So
I have
Gabby,
this. Oh, sorry.
so,
Go ahead.
so Gabby, so you guys, advocate a lot before the legislature, and you guys, target specific bills for defeat or for support, I would imagine. Do you all get involved in any sort of litigation?
We have not. We are connected with groups that do. Like, we don't have. We have no funding. We don't take funding in. We're completely like moms, dads, most of us working, that are just like, okay, I'm going to do this on the side. So we don't know, but we're affiliated in that town hall that we did with Freedom Angels. Part of that was initiated off of Tony Thurman and Board of Education and everything in the lawsuit against Chino Hills and the different school districts that were saying, hey, we as a school district are going to talk to parents and let them know if their child is having some kind of mental health issue. And trying to educate people on the bills with the legislature and what the state was doing drove us to do that town hall to get in front of more people quicker. And so, I lost my train of thought. But
Gabby, this might be a good place to
We're talking
jump
about
in with
possible litigation and people that
Yes.
you're involved with.
Yeah.
So we have not been a part of any litigation, but we work closely with groups that are doing that. So we don't have a lobbying arm or a legal arm, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, no, I got that, yes.
Well, Gabby, this might be a good area to jump in real quick, because this is a question we like to ask everybody, because maybe it helps others to feel like, if this something that, how do I do what you're doing? And is this something that were just, sparked by what happened with COVID? Or did you have other things in your background that sort of, had rang your Liberty bell at some earlier point? Did you, was there somebody you read or something, some other source that sort of woke you up to some of these things, to be a little more skeptical about what was going on around you here and with government?
I already knew that I wanted to homeschool. In reading and studying history and the Thomas Jefferson education and the conveyor belt education system, and recognizing that sending my kids to public school was going to have one outcome versus homeschooling would have a different, and being the primary influence in their lives. And so my husband and I knew before we had children that we wanted to be the primary influence. But from beyond that, I was a science major. My intent was to be a veterinarian. My background is animal science and management, a lot of advanced statistics. So when all this COVID data was coming in, I'm like, no. Like, I could poke holes through all of it, because that was my training. I was in PubMed and NIH pulling down studies on therapeutics, on patents with the coronavirus, all of these things. I was like, no, it's right here. And then watching as they tried to hide it and suppress it and gaslight people. So that's predominantly my background. And then I was for a little while with a leadership development company that emphasized on personal self-directed education. And I loved studying our founding fathers. And so there was that was the baseline, right, of my information base walking into all of this. At the time in 2019, I was happily a stay-at-home mom, wife, homeschooler, and I had no desire to be a community organizer or be at any meetings anywhere. But that was my foundation. And now I think where your question was going is, just like the Freedom Angels poured into us in 2020 and taught us, here's how you call, we have done the same thing. Most of the time that we're going to the Capitol or something, we're sending out an invite that says, if you would simply like to learn and be a fly on the wall, come, we will teach you. We have in the Telegram thread, there is a pinned video on how to go onto the state's Leginfo or Legiscan to search bills. Maybe you're passionate about dogs, and you can search all bills that reference dogs. Maybe you're passionate about 2A. You can search all the bills that they have coming out. And so in January, we sit down, our team, and we sit down and gather over lunch or dinner, and we have 3 or 4 laptops amongst us, and we're searching keywords on the legislation that's being introduced for the next cycle to get ahead of, okay, what are they focusing on based on certain parameters that we're watching for. And so it has morphed. And so we're constantly teaching other groups. And there are other groups that have kind of birthed out of tying in with us based on that. So you're constantly teaching others.
Okay, if we could take a little step back here for 1 second.
Sure.
You said you're homeschooling your kids, which is great. I'm in full support of that. Do you all take a position on school choice for the public at large?
I do believe I'm torn. Okay, so here's the duality in my brain, the argument in my brain. I absolutely believe people that should be able to choose where they send their kid to school for whatever reason their child is thriving in a different area. And I believe if we're going to have property taxes and we're going to have funding, and that it should follow the student. At the same time, I believe that it is not government's role, and that we're funneling and feeding into this conception that it is the government's job to make sure that we are properly educated, and please can you make sure the money you're taking from me is going with my child. I don't want them to take my money, and I don't want them to give it to me because you shouldn't have it in the first place. So that's the argument in my brain. It's like, yes, if we're continuing on this taxation system, yeah, I want the money to follow the student, but I also don't like it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I understand that it's the government role in the education of our children is your concern, which I am fully supportive of. The issue is though that barring the complete removal of the government from the education of our children, is there a second best alternative? Is what I would think is what we should probably try to focus on. I mean, I think getting the government totally out of education, to me, is a little bit of a fantasy, quite frankly. Even though I agree with the premise of your statement.
Mm-hmm. I think not everybody has the desire or the time to educate their children. A common thing, even with distance learning, is parents would say, "I don't like this distance learning. It's not good for my child, but I'm working from home and I can't also help them with math and literature, and how do I do this?" Right? And so it takes the strong support system. And so we're like, okay, do you have a neighbor? Do you have a grandmother? Do you have a cousin? And we don't have the village system anymore, so it takes a strong community. I homeschool, so my husband and I, sometimes the kids are with me and sometimes the kids are with him, and their school day looks a little bit different depending on who they're with, because we have that ability. Or my dad passed away and we're handling stuff, helping mom. I've got 12 nieces and nephews spread out around the living room. They're all doing school because they're all homeschooled. And so there's a family crisis, and they're all in one, and the older kids are helping the younger kids. And so in answer to your question, if we completely pull out the whole public education system, there needs to be something to catch it. There needs to be communities gathering together. Parents taught their children how to walk. They taught them how to ride a bike. They might have been the ones teaching them how to read. They're fully capable. The resources are there. Most of, I think we pay like $500 a year of me buying curriculum and manipulatives to educate my children. It doesn't take a lot of money. It is more an issue of time and safety. Are my children safe while I need to work? Are they in a safe place? And do I have the time to pour into them? Because homeschooling is not dictated by a time of day. There's just a set number of hours a week that you need to educate them. And so that can shift by family. Sometimes we do it in the morning, sometimes in the evening, sometimes the weekend. So it is a cultural and a mindset change to get us there. So that's a realistic concern. If we do away with this, then what? Right?
Well, and one of the other issues too in the whole school choice thing is it doesn't necessarily have to be an issue with. I mean, obviously, there's probably going to be an issue of some government funding stream, but it doesn't mean government has to be at all involved in the delivery of education. I mean, if you had competitors out there who are offering educational services, and if we didn't have to have 1,000 government strings attached to that, then you might actually see 1,000 flowers bloom as far as different competitive ideas for getting kids educated. So I don't, this is one of these problems here, which now it's all government and it's like a monopoly and it's, a horrifying product. But, I think this is probably a good place to segue into some of the work you guys are doing on the school situation. I did want to go a little farther into COVID, but I don't want to cut the other issue off. And so, James, maybe you could bring this up. One of the papers you guys put out here, I'm not sure exactly if it says this is to the legislatures and the committee members. So this is stuff you guys have submitted an action, and this is in July of 2023, and it's opposing an Assembly Bill 957, which sounds suspiciously like, in some ways, something that Governor Newsom just signed this last year, where essentially they were trying to keep from parents issues of what's happening with the kids at the school. And I'm not sure if that's all exactly what's happening in this particular Bill 957. It sounds like maybe he didn't sign that one, but he did just sign this other bill in July of this year, where essentially they said that they weren't going to tell the kids or the parents of kids if if that kid is having gender identification issues, I guess, at school, which sounds like potentially a mental health issue, because this is something that possibly has big impacts on the kid's, I guess, growth as he's going up, and the idea to keep that from a parent. But there's actually been issues. Gosh darn it, visual went away. But this is a particular article where a Virginia school board had to pay a teacher $575,000 for refusing to use student pronouns at school. But there was also let's see, where was the other one? Oh, darn it, I had a different article too, but I guess I didn't get that one posted. But there was a California teacher who was given a settlement recently of $375,000 because she was fired because she said, I can't keep this information from, parents, if I see this happening in a school. And so the school district fired her, and then they were forced to pay a settlement of $375,000. So this is kind of crazy stuff that's going on right now. But I guess what's the role you guys are taking at Stand Up Sacramento County on this?
So we're specifically tracking any bills that mention gender or trans or anything along that line. And so for some background, in 2022, SB 107 passed the legislature, and that went into effect of January of 2023. So it passed in 2022, and it was spun as a trans sanctuary state bill. And basically it gave legal protections to anyone, not just a parent or guardian, who facilitates a child from anywhere in California and from anywhere in the world coming here to receive gender affirming healthcare. And what that means is, regardless of whether that child came to California with their parents or their parents in California know, that child can go be receiving hormone therapy, even going on to surgery to mutilate their body. And so genital mutilating surgery behind their parents' back. And off of that bill, we started seeing bills like what you pointed out, AB 957. That was our letter with the legislature. When you go to talk on a bill, if you don't have a meeting, you show to a hearing, you get seconds to say, my name is Gabrielle, I'm founder of Stand Up Sacramento County, and I oppose this bill. That's it. You get nothing else. So the way you get your voice heard is you submit letters, and they go on public record, they're read in, the bill analysis is based off of that. And so that is what you saw, was us opposing AB 659, AB 957, which courts to consider a parent's affirming a child's gender identity or failure to do so in child custody matters. So if my husband decided my son is a girl, or my son decided he was a girl, and we were in a custody battle, and I said, no, he's a boy, then I would be considered as being toxic to his mental health, and custody could go to my husband. And so that bill did not succeed. But that is the lens that we're looking through is SB 107. What are they trying to do? They're stripping parental rights. They're mutilating children. All this money is funneling into this. And then that takes us to the battle with the schools with AB 1955, which, is being coined as the Safety Act. And it's safety of the child who is expressing confusion on their gender, that if my daughter goes to school and tells everybody to call her Bob, that they are to hide that from me.
Oh, and just real quick here, I have a visual to show. So I accidentally showed the wrong thing before, but this is Assembly Bill 1955. This is the one that Newsom just signed. And yeah, okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, and of note, this was a Gutton amend. Are you familiar with a Gutton amend?
No.
So in January of this year, this bill was introduced, or January of 2024 or 2023. The bill was introduced as a support academic features in education. It was to establish health days to provide screening for condom and health problems. That's how it cleared the assembly. When it hit the Senate in May, they amended it. In June, they voted to pass it as what we now know as the Safety Act. So it had already cleared the assembly as one bill. And so nobody was paying attention to it. And then they slid it through the Senate as a completely different bill. And the process is it then has to go back to the assembly to be voted on again in its amended form. If grassroots groups weren't paying attention, or a legislature, because sometimes we get calls from legislatures or emails that said, hey, take a look at this, because they now know how to get a hold of us. If that hadn't happened, this could have squeaked through and nobody known about it. But it was in response to Chino Hills had sued, or Tony Thurmond and the state had sued Chino Hills for their resolution that we will not hide things from parents, that we're going to support parental rights to know. And the state sued them as violating the safety of the children. That failed. And so then we saw this Gutton amend come through. And then that article that you had sent is now Tony Thurmond. Now they are being sued as the unconstitutionality of this bill.
And Gabby, let me break in here real quick, because I want to give people an actual concrete example. We showed this video before in another show that we did, but this is something the Goldwater Institute, it was representing this one woman who has a child who's in school in Maine. And essentially something very similar to what this California bill is doing was happening here in Maine. And she was absolutely surprised to find out some of the stuff that was going on at the school, conversations between counselors and her daughter that she had no awareness of. And it just happened to come up. And it better to just show the video, I guess. James, it's KOL 7. So maybe you could play that video for us.
Just always been able to come to me and talk to me about things. At the end of her 7th grade year, she began talking with a school social worker, but they did transfer her to this other social worker who I never met, and he never reached out to me to tell me that he was going to be working with my kiddo. And it just, everything about it felt like the goal was to remove me from any sort of conversation surrounding my daughter's mental health. One day, family affair, we were cleaning my daughter's bedroom and we discovered a breast binder in her bedroom. And so I had a conversation with her and asked her where it came from. She finally came out and told me that the school had given it to her, and more precisely, the school social worker. It hurt as a mom to know that she was keeping a secret, but I think it hurt even more to know that adults were encouraging her to keep these secrets. It really makes you wonder what other things are occurring in your schools. It really makes you question everything.
I think that story really hits the nail on the head. It's not maybe the most impactful in the results of what came out of that, but at least the issue is there, that a school is telling your kids stuff and then telling them, we're going to keep a secret from your parents, and that is just alarming that, whether it be that or, if they were, we had a school system here in Natomas Unified where they had this communist teacher who he had pictures of Mao and other things in the classroom, and he was giving the students extra credit to attend these activist rallies and other stuff like that, but it was like it was blown up by O'Keefe and Project Veritas here, so it was a big scandal. But it's funny too. The long and the short of it is the school wanted to fire him, and then they had to give him a whole bunch of money to go away. So I mean, it's like a no-win situation in a lot of these cases. But it's still the idea that there are these people, and they're kind of having conversations with your kids, and the parents have no idea what's going on in a lot of these cases. So, yeah.
This is the big problem about this gender ideology that have infected so much of our society, and they are doing irreparable harm to our children, and not enough people standing up to this garbage. I'm sorry, seriously.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at the stance the state is taking with these bills on what they're passing, when you look at SB 107 and you see the amount of detransitioners that showed up to the Capitol to help us push back on this bill, that most of them had their gender change surgery, their mutilation surgery when they were 15, 16 years old. There are lifelong consequences. They need to be on hormone therapy the rest of their life. Their brains aren't fully developed. Your brain's not done developing until 25. They're not educated that, hey, if you go on these hormones before even your sexual organs finish developing, you're not going to be able to enjoy things at the same level because your body is still going through puberty and changes, and there are lifelong consequences. And often the detransitioners will say, I'd like a 10-minute appointment, and they put me on pills. And they are $300,000 plus pharma patients, and this is happening behind parents' backs. And statistically, the numbers are significantly high. And so for me, I view public school as a predatory ground, to where children are not safe. And it's because of these predatory practices and the stances of the state, not the teachers. There are really amazing teachers there, but they are beholden to follow these policies. Then you look at Proposition 3 right now, up for vote next week, that will not adequately define marriage, and it opens up the possibility of child with adult. It doesn't even say human to human. We've got furries in classrooms. Galt Unified High School, a teacher came forward saying, I've got 2 classes that use litter boxes in class. It's not sanitary. So we're dealing with significant mental health issues, but it's also things that are taught in the classroom. They're not just being taught to read, write, and do arithmetic, right?
And just to be clear too, I mean, I'm a libertarian, so if it's adults making decisions for themselves, I don't have a huge issue. But this is children with the government, in the care of the government, and essentially almost being proselytized to some degree, because what's passing as the science, as we saw in COVID, is not it's the question of even what is a woman. We can't even decide that anymore, apparently. And I don't know. I mean, I just don't trust the government, I guess, to be the one to do the defining on all these things.
But you see, this is just the problem, though, Jason. This is just the problem. The public schools have become indoctrination camps. That's what they have become. That our children are learning things that they have no business in teaching these things to our kids. Yeah. It's madness.
There was a study, I don't have it in front of me if it was NIH or PubMed, but they did a study on children who have gender dysmorphia, who are confused. Am I supposed to be a boy or a girl? Your hormones are crazy during puberty. I remember it. I don't know about you guys, but they said 85% of children who are allowed to mature and that are just helped and talked through, like this is a normal process, your body is changing dramatically, that by the time they're an adult, they've sorted it out. And then the other 15% come out as gay or lesbian, or, they need to sort through the changes physically and emotionally and hormonally. And if they're left alone, They'll figure it out as they
Yes.
mature. I mean, even your
Yeah.
bone density without those hormones, how many of these kids are going to have osteoporosis? Like all of these things that are long-term consequences of this hormone therapy. That alone is criminal. Like
Yes.
they may really feel trapped in their body, and I empathize with them, but you're
Yes.
still a child and your body is still developing on a biological level. You're not done growing. And then we're going to go cut off organs? Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Healthy organs. Cut off
Healthy
healthy organs. That is what
healthy
they're doing.
organs.
Yeah.
On young kids. I don't know how this could be. I mean, okay, fine. You want to say if adults want to do this is fine. I mean, I may even have a problem there, but okay, they are adults. We supposed to be liberty minded. That's fine. But you're talking about children. You're talking about doing things that will do irreparable harm to them, and still so many sectors of our society support this evil.
Yeah.
They really do.
And just to take the other side of the argument, I mean, I wouldn't be, necessarily thinking it was a good idea for my kids or anything else like that. But the idea that at least if you want to think about where the authority should be, I'd much rather have the parents involved in this decision than some random government bureaucrat. I mean, I can't think of a more irresponsible way to do this than to allow somebody who's doesn't know your kid for more than a handful of days. I mean, as one of 1,000 maybe at a school, and they're making these decisions with your child who you've known for 15 to 20 years. I just the insanity of the whole idea is just it's just nuts. So
well, Jason, we'll then we'll have to draw the line out or ask the question, where are we going to draw the line on child abuse? We seriously would have to.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. You go ahead.
That's where the lawsuits are coming into play with AB 1955 is, basically school districts and teachers are being told to keep secrets from parents, but parents have a constitutional right to know what their child is doing, their property.
Exactly.
And so the reality is most of the parents are unaware of it because groups like ours, I mean, we have no Facebook presence. We got shadow banned down to 30 people. You can't even get on our Instagram. I haven't been able to log in since March, right? We are effectively silenced. You look at the Smith-Mundt Act and you've got the media operating as a propaganda arm, and most people support these pieces of legislation, or they support their children be diversity, equity, inclusion, because they're taught that they're being inclusive towards the lesbian and gay community. That's not what this is. Like, you can have a cousin who's trans as an adult and be against the mutilation of a child, right? It's this linear thinking that's being painted by the media, and that's what's wrong, is we're trying to penetrate that. And like, no, stop, think, child, right? What are we doing?
Child, exactly. Child.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, especially since you're having to do this in a car, I don't want to take too much of your time, but I did want to ask you, what are some of the biggest successes that you guys have had, you feel like, with your organization?
Some of the bills that have been shut down, or have been significantly modified. So ACA 665 was a minor's consent to mental health services, mental health-based kidnapping without due process. So that one passed, but it was significantly amended. And so we called that one the HPV bill. And so that was supposed to be a mandate for the HPV vaccine, and it turned into, like, they have to send a letter to educate, which is not great, but it's better. I had a list too. There was AB 957, gender identity with family law. AB 1090 was to remove the sheriff with a 4/5 vote. So, like, look at Orange County Board of Supervisors, right? Constantly going head to head with their sheriff. They could have voted by a 4/5 vote to remove an elected official. And so that was shut down. It never made through committee. So just bills that we were able to get people there. And and educate people up and down the state. Also,
just to jump in real quick on the sheriff
Go
issue,
ahead.
that's something that we saw during COVID, where this was in a lot of places might have been the last line of defense for the constitutional rights that people had, because as an elected officer, he did not answer to the higher political powers within the state. And so a lot of times it might have been, whether it's maybe gun rights or your, rights to, not be locked in your home, I guess, or whatever. A lot of times a sheriff in some places may have been the only thing standing between you and a larger authoritarian government. So,
Correct.
Sorry, I just wanted to.
No, that's good. More recently was the firearms annual registration of firearms, SB 1160, where guns must be registered with an undisclosed fee paid annually to maintain said registration. And then there would be warrants, $1,000 fine per firearm if you didn't. And so, going after our Second Amendment rights. And so we pushed back on the reparations. The California American Freedmen Affairs Agency to award reparations to anybody of African American descent in the state of California. We pushed back on that. I think we were one of the only opposition. Nobody wanted to touch it. We're like, we'll touch it. And so
I guess California is just the right ground for you guys to have cause.
You weren't afraid that somebody might jump up and call you a racist? My God.
Yeah. I mean, I've had worse. I mean, I've got every label out there, because so I'm like, whatever, just hit me with it. But I'm like, California never had African slaves. Like, what are we doing? And then based on the definitions of the bill, I mean, somebody could have been born and raised in Missouri and their family came here 3 years ago. They're of African American descent, so they get reparations. And somebody that moved here from Nigeria and immigrated here, well, you're African, so you get reparations. Like, give them to everybody. And so it's like, dude. So no, we touched it, and that bill was moved to the inactive file on Assembly, so it was never, and so it basically died in a fiscal committee. So those are just some of them. There's more. My brain's not grasping them, but I think our biggest success, more than anything, has been the relationships that have built. I didn't start out reaching out trying to get to know legislators or city council members, or I'm like, look, you represent me. I need to talk to you. Listen, that was my attitude. And now it's like, okay, you're a human, let's talk. And so now we have, with Board of Supervisors, we had multiple whistleblowers come out through public health that would funnel us information. Hey, county public health was here and they're training dogs to sniff children in line in school to sniff out COVID. I'm like, well, that sounds like a prison system.
That's the science that we're talking about.
Science, yes.
Like things that are off the wall. I say it out loud now. I'm like, nuh-uh, right? But we would get tips. Hey, watch for this. And I've gotten text messages from the Capitol. Hey, this is a bill to look at. We need support. We've been called in by senators or assembly members. Hey, you need to look at this. Can we sit down and talk about it? We scared a legislator last year. We put out a call to action of like, hey, this is a legislator we usually support, but we're not liking this bill. We got to immediately, they're like, can you come in? And we were there the next day because they were like, okay, we need to sit down and talk on this. And our attitude is like, yes, we want to sit down and talk, but just because you're of a specific party doesn't mean you're like free. Like we're just going to turn our head, as you kind of try and do mediocre. Like either the bill's good or it's not. It's not like kind of good.
Let me ask you something.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you something. You just spoke about the process where you may get bills that are proposed, you get them amended. Who help you guys with the amendment? You get friendly senators, friendly legislators? Do you have lawyers that you work with? Who help you get those bills modified?
So we specifically have only put forth one amendment request. We're kind of learning as we go. we've only, and it was rejected. So we have only done that once. There with Stand Up Sacramento County, I guess I'm the face, I'm the founder, but there's a team that likes to stay in the shadows for whatever their job or all of the things that they do. And some of them are homeschool moms. There's an attorney. There's other business professionals, and we will sit down and we will look at things. And there's a team of, there has been anywhere from 3 to 10 people writing position letters and requesting calls to action. So I may have misspoken. We have not put forth ourselves a bill or an amendment that has been uptaken. I haven't written a bill before. We simply have put forth one amendment request, and it did not clear.
Okay.
I don't think it even made it out of their office. They're like, we don't think that's going to work. It was, so yeah.
Well,
I don't
as a libertarian, I'm just honestly just astounded that you guys have managed to actually throw roadblocks in the way of all this nonsense. Because I mean, the biggest issue.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
The biggest issue.
Well, for libertarians, I mean, the biggest issue is keeping the government and the state from growing. And I mean, you know, the fact that to me, it's just absolute wonderful work that you guys are doing, that you guys are making such a difference, because I think most people are so intimidated. They don't imagine they can make a difference. And it appears you guys are really actually having some impact. And so it just absolutely hats off to you, because you guys, it sounds like you guys are really doing great work out there.
Thank you. And you said it perfectly. Like sometimes I'm like, is this worth it? Right? Because sometimes we're losing sleep, like trying to, you know, we all have our jobs and our kids and all of these things, and we're up till 1 a.m. writing a position letter on something. Like, why, if we were following the Constitution, y'all wouldn't even have put this bill forward. Like, this is seriously insane. But it's the speed bumps that we see being thrown out that kind of keep us moving forward. Okay, like, are we going to save California? That's not really our goal. It's more like, how many more people are we going to wake up in the process while we hold this back that can help, right? Like Stand Up Sac County, we're not trying to save the world. We're just like, that bill is going to affect my household, and so I'm going to say something about it. And then hopefully other people show up with us, right?
That's awesome. Well, you know, we've kept you for a long time, so let's jump to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol real quick, where we can kind of end with a little bit of a laugh here. And so obviously it's campaign season, and as you said, your friend is running locally, but obviously most people's eyes are on the presidential election and just the huge consequences that may come out of that. Well, it's kind of funny, and James, maybe you could bring up the visual here. So Kamala, you know, was at a recent rally of hers, and of course there's all this jousting about who can get the biggest rallies, and obviously Trump has these huge rallies. Well, she had a rally, and she actually had a lot of people who were calling her name, and then the sort of the oddest thing happened, the most awkward, almost a sitcom worthy moment. And we have a video of this where I guess, you know, they were chanting her name, and then she turned to them and said, "Chant your name," and it was just very awkward. So Jane, maybe you could play the video. It's KNP1, and I've added a little bit of flair to it.
And my whole career, okay, now I want each of you to shout your own name. Do that. Because it's about all of us. It's about all of us. Now I want each of you to shout your own name.
I can't imagine what she could have been thinking. I remember shouting their own name. Anyway, did you guys have any thought? I just think it's so sad that this is what we've come to.
I just cannot believe that this idiot might be the president of the United States. Okay, that's my problem right there. Okay, all right.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
Tim, any thoughts on this one?
I can't wait for it to be all over.
Yes.
Agreed.
The biggest words of wisdom we've heard in a while. Well, I did want to, I guess, give you
anything about it, Gabby. Do you have anything to say
about Kamala or
about the video about the whole the what we're showing here?
Yeah. I think. I mean, I don't expect anything more, right? Just we've watched her in California and then seeing her on the federal stage.
Yes.
And it's, did she read the prompter like Biden? And then it said, say your name, chant with them, or was she really wanting them to say that and didn't realize? I mean, I'm not surprised anymore.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh. It's just a deep sigh. It's just
that is the ultimate sadness. We're not surprised anymore.
No.
As Tim said, when can this all be over?
I didn't even think about that. That maybe she read it off the prompt.
Yeah.
The instruction of the prompter without realizing it, and then she read it out loud.
Yeah. Oh. Well, I tell you, what you've told us has been really inspiring, seeing your level of commitment and action and results that you've been getting. If somebody wants to join or if somebody wants to get involved, do you have any final words that you'd like to leave the audience with in this respect?
If you want to follow along and see what we're tracking, whether it's the next outbreak, what they're talking about, or upcoming legislation, or follow Stand Up Sacramento County, there is a chat option off when we do posts. We are shadow banned heavily on social media. I do have a public Instagram, Cali Mama G, that is working in this moment. It's CALI_Mama, MAMA_G, as in Gabrielle. Just because I can't get into Stand Up Sac County, but more than anything, follow along. And if you have a question, you can comment. You can email us at standupsacramentocounty@gmail.com. If you see something, feel free to comment on whatever thing we've posted and share it. Like, hey, people, pay attention to Rancho Cordova City Council. They're doing XYZ. Let us know and we'll take a look at it. Because we can't have our eyes on everything. Sacramento County is a really big county. And so even with state actions, I think Tulare notified us of a bill that we hadn't seen yet. We're all talking to each other. So feel free to weigh in. Absolutely.
Well, and I guess just the call I always make to the audience as we leave, think about what you can do in your community if you're watching this. There's, this is Sacramento County stand up, but there's no reason you couldn't have a stand up in your state or your county where you're kind of doing things that Gabriel's doing. So reach out, try and figure out what you can do, because I tell you, they're coming for our liberty in a lot of places. And if we don't stand up and do something about it, it's going to disappear. So definitely, think about what you could be doing before the next show, and certainly reach out to people like Gabby and see what ideas you can get from her. So thanks again so much, Gabby, for joining us. And until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Please get
Good night.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.